Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I think I need to thank Mr. Encik Ismail for setting the stage about green IT. I think you guys heard enough. I mean you guys should have learned a lot of stuff about green IT from Encik Ismail just now. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to talk about QCT and how we as QCT is going to help you guys with achieving some of the green IT goals. Okay. Now, a bit about QCT. I assume most of you guys have not heard of QCT. Anyone? Okay, good. Now, QCT is actually a Taiwanese company owned by Quanta QCT. Okay, it's actually one of the largest company in Taiwan, and it's a Fortune 500 company. It's a 20-plus-year-old company. They have been pretty low profile for the last 20-plus years. Okay, these guys, they have been doing a lot of design and manufacturing for the big brands. Okay, they have two segments of the business. One segment is consumer, one segment is enterprise. So on the consumer side, a lot of notebook brands that you buy in the market, right? Whatever brand it could be. There's a high chance that it's actually designed and made by Quanta. 25% of them are made by Quanta, okay? Now, on the other side of it, the enterprise side. 1/7 of the world's server are made by them, okay? It could be any brands, okay? They actually design and make equipment for the other brands as well, okay? The group is quite big. They do about $30+ billion in a year in terms of revenue. And what they have done is back in year 2012, the owner of Quanta decided that, hey, hang on, we've been doing this long enough. Let's set up a subsidiary. They call it QCT. And they start selling equipment, network switches, servers, and storage equipment under their own brand, QCT. Okay? So what they are good at is engineering. As I mentioned, they are the guys who do the design and manufacturing for a lot of the big brands. So they have all the skill sets there. Okay? So some of the QCT users in the world, Facebook is one of the key customers for them. In Malaysia, we have folks like TM, Packer One, and the rest of the guys using us. So they are actually quite known outside of Malaysia, okay, for the big guys. A lot of the big guys use them. Now, what I'm going to talk about next are the server, right? When you talk about server, how would a server contribute to green IT, right? How is it evolving, okay? Now, if you look at server, there are a few key ingredients, okay? The RAM, the hard disk, of course, the power supply, you need power supply to power it up, network card, and the CPU. These are the key elements. Without this, your server wouldn't work, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about them one at a time. How things are changing across the last few years, how we're evolving, how we're making things better, more efficient, and so-called help with green IT. Now, CPU. This is a good example. Back in 2012, Intel came out with the E5-2600 example, okay? In 2013, let me adjust a bit. In 2013, they came out with a version 2 and version 3, okay, in 2014. And if you look at it, the power requirement for the first generation, it's about here, 95 watt. Second generation, it dropped to 80 watt. Third generation, it increased a bit to 85 watt. But in terms of performance, it increased more, okay? So what if you look at this, as a result of this, what you're getting is you use less power, but you get more computing out of it, okay? That play a good role in contributing to green IT. Now, RAM. RAM is another one. You need, I mean, just like your PC, your desktop, you need the memory module in there, okay? Similarly, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have been using DDR3, okay? DDR3, in general, in the market, what you have is a 1.35 volt, 1.5 watt, okay? Now, we moved to DDR4. And DDR4 has a lower voltage, 1.2. It gives you better performance. It consumes less electricity, Okay? Again, this is another factor to it. It also helps reduce their power consumption, right? The third one is the hard disk. I'm not going to spend too much time about it. We have now speaker, Elaine. Miss Elaine will talk more about it. But even for the hard disk, I mean, hard disk is something that we've been using for I don't know how many, I guess decades, right? And of course, the capacity keep increasing. And the good news about it is they also keep improving the technology. Nowadays, you get more capacity with less power consumption, okay? The third one here is power supply unit. This is the one that we see a lot from marketing perspective. 80 plus, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and titanium. Now people is talking about titanium, okay? But there's a bit of misconception here about power supply, okay? For example here, if you look at this rating, it is the most efficient at 50% load factor. When you use it at 50% load factor, you get the most efficiency out of it, okay? You could be using a platinum, but if you're not using it at the right load factor, you actually don't get that kind of efficiency, okay? So it's something to watch out for. If you're putting in a server, check out the power consumption you need and the power supply. Because in the market, there are options, right? When you buy a server, they let you choose, hey, you want 500 watt power supply, 750 watt, 1000 watt, and so on. So these are some of the things to watch out for. But the message here is, the power supply unit is also improving efficiency, okay? But it is also up to the user to spec it out correctly to get the maximum efficiency. Okay. Now, this is something that is very special to Quanta, okay, to the QCT hardware. It's a thing called the OCP card, okay, Open Compute. I'll talk about it in the next few slides. But basically, if you look at the card, this is a typical 10 gigabit copper RJ45 PCI card. The size is big. With Open Compute, we made it smaller, okay? So when it becomes smaller, what do you get? Of course, less materials. You get better cooling out of it and reduce the cost, okay? Now, so if you look at it, right, if you get all this right, the CPU, the RAM, the hard disk, the network card, the power supply, if everything is correct, you actually help reduce the carbon footprint. You reduce the power consumption, reduce your cooling requirements, and all this will come along, and you help with the green IT, okay? Now, I mentioned Open Compute, OCP. This is a bit of history about Open Compute. It's actually an initiative started in 2009 by Facebook, okay? They officially launched it in 2011. So what Facebook is trying to do is, I mean, everyone uses Facebook. Facebook got a few big data center, and you can imagine the amount of electricity they use, okay? So it actually became a bit of a problem for Mark, right? He was like, hey, hang on, let's figure out what we can do. We need to reduce our power consumption, the cooling needs, right? So what he has done is he initiated the Open Compute project. What they look at is the entire ecosystem, how to build something. I mean, it's not just open, but it's also figure out how to make it power efficient, cooling efficient, and so on. So it's everything, from the software, server, rack, power supply, and cooling. This is what he has done, okay? And this is also where QCT, Quanta has contributed a lot. In fact, one of the first few Open Compute project was designed by Quanta for Facebook. Okay? So this is a case study for Facebook with their data center in Prineville. They have a power use efficiency of 1.078 in Q2 of 2015. The American EPA best practice is 1.5, so they are like 50% better than what the government expects. Water usage efficiency, this is where they use the water for cooling. And they are doing about 0.268 liter per kilowatt. Industry average is 1. So you can imagine how much they have saved with the OCP. I mean, of course, not everything is OCP, but a lot of other things as well. They use solar power and all kinds of other stuff. But OCP is one of the brainchild that contributed a lot to this. Okay? And that's why QCT, as one of the pioneers in the design, we also incorporated the OCP design in our equipment. Okay. So a bit of a summary here. What QCT has done in terms of green IT. Obviously, as I mentioned, we support the OCP network card, which I've shown. I actually have a physical unit out there. If you guys can go and check it out, and you guys can take a look at it, have a feel of it, and you see the difference. Okay. Obviously, we also support all the technology I mentioned, the latest and greatest, the RAM, the CPU, and so on. We also have this thing called the QDCM, Quanta Data Center Manager. It's a software that allows a data center operator to monitor their power consumption, their cooling efficiency, and so on. So with data, you can further improve. You can't improve if you don't have the data, right? So with QDCM, you can do that. Okay. And now, this is something that's also quite special about the QCT server. We do put in a lot of effort in the design in terms of cooling management of the server. So you get the best cooling with the lowest cost. Okay. I'll give you some example here. This is a typical 1U and 2U server. Okay. So this example here for this particular model, right? Obviously from this, one of the key factors is the CPU. Right? This is the old generation, as I mentioned, using the second generation CPU. This is the third generation CPU, and you can see the performance per watt. You get better performance out of it. Okay? Another thing is the idle power. Okay? When you have a server, it doesn't mean your server is running 24/7 it keeps doing things. There are times where it slows down, it doesn't do a lot of work. But it still uses power, right? So what we have done here in QCT in the design, in the power management of the server, we also put in some logics and mechanism to reduce the idle power consumption. So when it's not doing work, you use less energy. Okay. This one is quite good as well, thermal design. We can operate at temperature up to 40 Celsius. Most of the major brands out there, they do up to 35 Celsius. So what does this mean to you? Okay? That means you can use less cooling. You don't have to set your air conditioner to like 18 Celsius or 20 Celsius. You could do it at 25 Celsius. That will save you some money. Okay? Reduce the cooling. Okay? And this is where we see a lot of, what do you call that, benefit out of it. Okay? Because cooling, especially in Malaysia, you really use a lot of energy with air conditioning. Okay? Another thing we have done, this ties back to the power supply that I mentioned earlier. If you remember what I mentioned, the efficiency of your power supply depends on the load factor that you're putting on the power supply unit. Okay? So what we have here is active and active standby mode, right? Active basically means they distribute the load. So if you have two power supply unit at 400 watt, you're actually putting in 800 watt of capacity. So in that way, if your server on average is using 400 watt, you are actually doing the 50% load factor, okay? But if you don't need that, you can change the mode to active standby. This means that you're using 400 watt, the other one is on standby. So if you're, say for example, your server, you calculate the average, hey, it's just using 200 watt. Let's make my power supply more efficient. I'll change this to active standby mode. We'll be using that single power supply. When things go wrong, it will automatically flip over, no downtime. So this will also help with the Green IT initiative. Another example here is the 2U 4-node server, okay? This server, if you look at it, it's actually 4 independent servers in an enclosure, okay? small form factor. You can call it a small form factor per server. And each server supports 2 CPU, the E5 CPU. Okay? It is one of the highest density in the market. And the good news about it is a few things that we do here to help in terms of dollar and cents and also green IT. It uses less power. Okay? If you look at it, if you have 4 separate servers, each of them say you need a 500 watt or 700 watt power supply unit. You're looking at about 2,000 plus watt. This one, 1,006. Okay, that saves you a lot of money already. Save you space, and most importantly, it saves you on cooling. And how do we do that? In our design, we have a dual rotor technology, which helps with airflow. Okay, it helps with better cooling, and with it comes the better efficiency and reduce the cooling requirements in your data center or in your data room, right? So all this helps, right? And if you look at it, you use less footprint, use less power, less cooling, you get the best performance out of it. Okay. Another thing I mentioned earlier, the Quanta Data Center Manager, QDCM. This is the thing I mentioned earlier. It helps you monitor your server, right? The temperature, the power that it's using, and so on. This data will help. Of course, if you're running 1-2 server, it may not make too much of a difference, but of course it helps. If you have like 10 server, 20 server, with this data, it will help you. You can figure out how to make your thing more efficient, right? It's not necessarily just the equipment. It could be the location, right? With this data, again, with the data, right, you can figure, hey, hang on, what if I move my rack a little bit or change the position of my air conditioner? Will it make it more efficient? It could. Without the data, you wouldn't know. The data helps, okay? There's just another slide, more extension to it. The temperature, the power usage, and so on, right? Again, all these are data. You need the data. Another thing that we're doing from Quanta perspective, as part of our Green IT initiative, this is something that's going to be launched soon, okay? It's an enterprise switch, but it's fanless, okay? So there are not too many enterprise-grade network switches in the market that are fanless, and this is one of the few. Fanless means you have better cooling, you use less power, less electricity. And we are proud to say that this only uses 35 watt of power, okay? This is almost like, okay, it's almost like what you got at home, right? Your home router, Wi-Fi router, fanless, but of course it's a smaller scale at home. But this is almost like that. And this is one of the great innovation that Quanta will be launching soon. So, in summary, there's a few things that I want to focus on, I want to talk about here is Quanta, as a company with all the engineering skill set, we continue to make the hardware more energy efficient, okay? And we have seen that from the first generation, second generation, third generation of the hardware. It continues to be more efficient when it comes to energy consumption. We also adopt the newer technology as mentioned. We put in the open compute technology to make things better, less power consumption and so on, right? But of course, we also need more users to use our equipment to make an impact, right? You can have all the greater technology in the world. If no one uses, it's not going to make a difference. Just like hybrid car. You can have all manufacturers come in and make all kind of hybrid car. If no one drives them, there's no point of having them with making the world greener, right? So like what I said earlier, there's a few components, key components in the server, right? Every little bit of things helps, right? For all we know, maybe next year, someone will come up with some other technology that will be more efficient. We'll incorporate that, right? So the key message that I'm trying to deliver here is QCT, as a hardware manufacturer, we continue to evolve to make our things better and more energy efficient. I think that's all I have. Quite short, so we can get an earlier lunch.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Mr. Chan for your informative insight in regards to Quanta QCT.